Step forward and be named." The Alpha's voice rolled through the night air, sharp as a whip. One by one, the young wolves stepped into the silver glow of the full moon, heads bowed, hearts pounding as their names were called, names that tied them to proud bloodlines, to ancestors who had run beneath this same moon centuries before. But when the last name was called, the clearing fell silent, and Evelyn was still standing in the shadows. Her throat tightened as all eyes turned toward her. She wished the ground would swallow her whole. The Alpha's piercing gaze swept over her and then away, dismissing her like a leaf blown by the wind. No name, no bloodline, no place among them. A ripple of whispers passed through the pack. Evelyn felt their stares prick her skin like nettles. Lysander, her foster brother, grinned cruelly from across the fire. "Well, of course she wasn't called," he said loudly, making sure the entire pack could hear him. "She's nothing but a shadow. How can a shadow have a name?" Laughter followed, harsh and ugly. Even the pups joined in, repeating the word like a chant. Shadow, shadow, shadow. Evelyn forced herself to stand tall, but her heart was breaking. The firelight blurred as tears stung her eyes. She swallowed hard, refusing to let them see her cry. Not here. Not now. When the blessing ended and the pack dispersed, Evelyn slipped away into the woods. She ran until the clearing was far behind her, until the voices faded, and only the rustle of leaves remained. She fell to her knees beside the riverbank, gasping for breath, gripping the earth with trembling hands. "Why am I even here?" she whispered into the night. Her reflection wavered in the black water. Pale face, dark hair, eyes that glistened with unshed tears. She had lived her whole life trying to belong, obeying the rules, doing every chore, taking every insult without complaint. And still she was nothing. Still, they reminded her every day that she was not one of them. Something inside her snapped then. Quiet, but final, like the sound of a thread breaking. Evelyn rose to her feet, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I won't stay," she said softly, her voice trembling but sure. "Not another day. Not another hour." She returned to the den only long enough to grab a small satchel, a worn blanket, a crust of bread, a flask of water. Her foster mother did not stir as Evelyn passed by. She had probably known Evelyn would leave one day, and had chosen not to care. At the edge of the territory, Evelyn paused. Behind her lay the pack's bonfire glow, the only home she had ever known, and the source of every wound carved into her heart. Ahead lay darkness, the unknown. She took a deep breath, tilted her face to the moon, and stepped forward. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, not with fear, but with something wild and free. For the first time in her life, Evelyn felt a spark of hope. She ran, through the trees, across the hills, barefoot and breathless, until the night swallowed her whole. And though her heart still ached, a single thought carried her onward. If no one would give her a name, she would carve out her own. Evelyn didn't stop running until the trees fell behind her and the horizon began to glow with the first light of dawn. Her legs wobbled with every step, her throat dry, her chest aching as if her heart might burst out of it. Then she saw it. At first it looked like a mirage, white stone towers piercing the pale sky, banners swaying gently in the morning wind, walls stretching so wide they seemed to hold up the sun itself. The palace. Her breath caught. She had heard stories about it when she was little, whispered by the other pups. Stories about the Alpha King's court, about gold corridors and wolves so powerful they could crush you with a look. She had never imagined she would see it with her own eyes. And now she was standing at its gates, dust clinging to her torn dress, hair tangled from the forest, looking very much like a stray. 2 guards blocked her way, spears crossed. "Halt," one said sharply. "What business have you here?" I'm looking for work," Evelyn stammered, clutching her satchel. "I can scrub floors, carry water, anything, please." The guards exchanged a skeptical glance, but eventually let her through, pointing her toward the servants' wing. Inside, Evelyn nearly forgot how to breathe. The palace was a dream carved into stone. She passed gardens full of flowers more colorful than anything she'd seen in the wild. fountains that glittered like crystal, and corridors so polished they reflected her weary face back at her. When Mistress Rowan, the head maid, looked her over, Evelyn braced for rejection. The woman's face was stern, her sharp eyes cutting through Evelyn like knives. "You're astray," Rowan said flatly. Evelyn's stomach nodded. "I can work," she said quickly, voice trembling. "I'll work harder than anyone else. Just give me a chance." Mistress Rowan stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she sighed. "Very well. You'll start with kitchen work. If you're lazy or cause trouble, you'll be out by nightfall. Understand?" "Yes," Evelyn whispered, barely daring to breathe. "Thank you." She was given a plain gray servant's dress and a corner in the laundry room to wash herself before starting work. The fabric was rough but clean, and when she caught her reflection in the polished brass of a basin, she almost didn't recognize herself. Her first task was simple: sweep the corridor outside the Great Hall. But the moment Evelyn stepped into the main wing of the palace, she forgot all about the broom in her hands. The hall stretched endlessly ahead of her, bathed in soft morning light. Gold-trimmed arches soared toward the ceiling, tapestries hung like pieces of history, and sunlight spilled through tall windows, painting the floor in pale streaks. She had never seen beauty like this. And then movement caught her eye. Evelyn froze, her breath caught in her throat as her gaze climbed the marble staircase to the balcony above. He stood there, the Alpha King. Even from where she stood far below, he seemed to command the very air around him. His dark hair caught the sunlight, his shoulders straight, his presence so powerful that it made something deep inside Evelyn's chest tremble. She couldn't look away. Her fingers tightened around the broom until her knuckles ached. She had seen alphas before, proud warriors of her former pack, but none of them had this. This quiet authority, this unshakable calm, this way of standing still and yet seeming to hold the entire hall in the palm of his hand. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, lowering an instinctive submission. It was almost too much to bear, this pull toward him, this strange heat creeping up her neck. And then, just for a moment, Alden's head tilted slightly, as though he had felt something. A presence. Evelyn's heart leapt to her throat, but he didn't see her. His golden gaze swept the hall once before turning back to the man speaking beside him, his attention shifting as easily as if she had never been there at all. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her entire body trembling. He hadn't seen her. He hadn't noticed her. And yet her world suddenly felt different, fuller, brighter, terrifyingly alive. She clutched the broom against her chest, cheeks burning, heart hammering wildly, as though her wolf had just whispered something she wasn't ready to hear. For the rest of the morning, Evelyn worked with her head bowed and her thoughts spinning, replaying that single moment over and over again. The Alpha King didn't even know she existed. But Evelyn already knew that she would never forget the way it felt to stand beneath his gaze. Even if it had never landed on her, Evelyn spent the rest of that morning sweeping the marble corridor, but her mind wasn't on her broom. It was still on him, the Alpha King, standing so effortlessly above the hall, as though the whole world bent toward him. She had no right to think about him. She was just a maid now, a shadow moving through the palace, someone meant to be invisible. And yet, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget the sight of him. When the bell rang for the servants' midday break, Evelyn hurried to the kitchen. The other maids were already seated on the long bench, eating bread and fruit, their chatter filling the air. Evelyn kept her head down, choosing the far end of the table, but she couldn't help overhearing the conversation around her. "Did you see him this morning?" one maid whispered, giggling behind her hand. "The king?" another asked, leaning forward eagerly. "Of course the king," the first said, rolling her eyes. "He passed through the east wing today. The way he looked. Goddess, if he'd looked at me like that, I'd have fainted on the spot." "Don't waste your breath," an older maid said with a smirk. "He's not looking at any of us. The council says he's searching for a queen. Probably someone with a bloodline as pure as moonlight." The word stung more than Evelyn expected. Of course he would want someone like that. A noble she-wolf, tall and proud, with a lineage she could trace back to the first alphas. Not a maid, not an omega with no name. She pushed her bread away, appetite gone. When the break ended, Evelyn returned to her duties, but her clumsiness grew worse. She spilled a bucket of water near the laundry hall, nearly slipped on the polished floor while carrying firewood, and once almost knocked over a vase that looked expensive enough to feed her for a year. The other maids laughed at her softly behind her back. "Careful, little shadow," one of them said, smirking. "If Mistress Rowan sees you dropping things, she'll send you back where you came from." Evelyn's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She just kept working, trying to steady her shaking hands. By nightfall her back ached, her feet were raw, and her eyelids felt heavy as stone. She collapsed on the thin cot she had been given in the servants' quarters and stared at the ceiling. She told herself not to think about him, not to imagine what it would be like if he had seen her this morning, not to picture those golden eyes turning her way, truly looking at her. But as sleep claimed her, her mind betrayed her. She dreamed of him, standing on the balcony, his gaze fixed on her, his mouth curving into the faintest of smiles, as if she were a secret only he knew. Evelyn woke with a start, heart pounding, face burning. "What is wrong with me?" she muttered, burying her face in her hands. He was the Alpha King. He wasn't for her. He wasn't for anyone like her. And yet, her heart wouldn't listen. The next few days blurred together for Evelyn. Work, sleep, repeat. She tried to ignore the gossip, tried to forget the dream of him that had left her so restless. But fate wasn't finished with her. On the fifth night, the palace buzzed with unusual excitement. The head maid barked orders faster than Evelyn could obey them. A royal banquet was to be held, a feast for the king's council, a night of wine, music, and talk of matters far above a maid's head. Evelyn had never seen the great hall lit this way. Chandeliers blazed overhead, casting a golden glow over the polished floors. Tables stretched the length of the room, draped in silk, set with plates that gleamed like moonlight. "Keep your head down," one of the senior maids hissed at her as they handed her a tray stacked with crystal goblets. "And for the goddess's sake, don't make a sound." Evelyn swallowed hard and nodded. She moved slowly, carefully, her fingers trembling around the tray's edges. The hall was filling quickly now, nobles in embroidered coats, warriors in dark leathers, council members with stern faces. And at the far end of the table, on the raised dais, sat King Alden. Evelyn's breath caught before she could stop it. He was even more striking up close, all sharp lines and quiet power, his golden eyes reflecting the candlelight like molten fire. She told herself to look away, to focus on her steps, but the moment her gaze lingered, her toe caught on the edge of the rug. The tray tilted. Time seemed to slow as the crystal goblets crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 tiny stars. Gasps rippled through the hall. Evelyn froze, horror crashing over her. She dropped to her knees at once, head bowed so low her forehead nearly touched the marble. I'm sorry," she whispered, though the words barely made it past her dry throat. Every sound in the hall had gone still, no chatter, no clinking of cutlery. The weight of 100 stairs pressed down on her back. Then she heard footsteps, slow, measured, getting closer. Her stomach twisted painfully. This was it. She would be dragged out, scolded, maybe even whipped for such clumsiness. The footsteps stopped in front of her. "Look at me." The voice was deep, calm, commanding. Evelyn hesitated, heart hammering against her ribs. Slowly she raised her head. King Alden was kneeling in front of her. The sight nearly stole her breath. He shouldn't be kneeling, not for a servant, not in front of the entire court. And yet here he was, lowering himself to meet her eye level. Instead of anger, his face held something else, something unreadable. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly, as though the hall wasn't holding its breath behind him. Evelyn shook her head quickly, unable to form words. "Then it's only glass," he said, and reached down, picking up the largest shard before setting it back on the tray. The entire court watched in stunned silence. Evelyn's throat felt tight, her hands fumbling to collect the rest. Her fingers brushed his once, just once, and the contact sent a jolt through her, sharp and terrifying. When the last of the broken pieces were gathered, Alden rose to his full commanding height. "See that the floor is cleaned," he told the steward, his tone so casual it almost sounded like mercy. Then, before leaving, he glanced back at her, just briefly, but long enough that Evelyn's heart twisted in her chest. For the first time since entering the palace, she felt seen. The banquet was over, but Evelyn's mind kept replaying the moment like a scene she could not escape. The crash, the silence, the weight of 100 eyes, and then the king, the way he had knelt, the way his gaze had held hers as though he was seeing past her trembling hands, past her mistakes, straight into her soul. She spent the next morning scrubbing the floors as if she could erase the memory from her mind. But her hands betrayed her. They shook every time a goblet clinked, every time a footstep echoed behind her. And worse, the court had not forgotten. "That's the girl who made the king kneel," one of the scullery maids whispered loudly as Evelyn passed by with a bucket. "Or maybe he just wanted an excuse to look at her," another giggled. Heat flamed in Evelyn's cheeks. She ducked her head and hurried on, wishing the stone floor would swallow her whole. But the whispers followed her everywhere. By the end of the week, Evelyn had nearly convinced herself that the king had already forgotten her, that she was just a clumsy maid, a forgettable shadow in his grand hall. Until it happened. She was polishing silver in one of the empty side corridors when footsteps sounded behind her. She turned, expecting the head maid. It was him, King Alden. Evelyn's breath caught. She dropped her cloth and scrambled to her feet, bowing so low her hair tumbled forward. "My king," she stammered, heart hammering. He stopped a few steps away from her, his presence filling the corridor like the air itself shifted to make room for him. "What's your name?" The question was simple, yet it sent a tremor through her. No one had ever asked her that with such quiet weight. She swallowed hard. "Evelyn," she said softly, as though the sound of it might shatter. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, to her shock, he repeated it under his breath, almost like he was tasting it. "Evelyn." Her stomach fluttered. "Go on," he said finally, stepping aside to let her pass. "Don't let me keep you from your work." But as she hurried away, she felt his gaze on her back, heavy, searching, like a hand that lingered without touching. That night, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the servants' quarters. Her name still echoed in her ears in the king's low, steady voice. Why had he asked? Why had he said it like that? Her heart should have been still. She had promised herself she would keep her head down, stay invisible. And yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, those golden eyes gleaming like twin moons. The following days only made it worse. Every time she entered the hall to serve wine, she felt his gaze find her. It was never obvious, never long enough for anyone else to notice. But she could feel it, warm against her skin like sunlight. And the other servants noticed her flustered state. "Someone's got the king's attention," one of the maids teased as they worked in the kitchens. "Do you think he'll take you as his mistress?" "Stop it," Evelyn muttered, though her face betrayed her. The maids giggled and shared knowing glances. By the end of the day, even the guards seemed to have heard the whispers. Evelyn couldn't walk across the courtyard without feeling eyes follow her. And yet, part of her heart ached for those glances, for the brief moments where the king's eyes seemed to soften, for the way he had said her name as if it belonged somewhere other than in the mouth of her cruel foster brother. But longing was dangerous. She reminded herself of that with every step she took. She was just a maid. He was the Alpha King. A love like that was not just forbidden. It was impossible. And yet, lying awake at night, Evelyn pressed her hands to her chest and whispered his name into the dark. The gossip had barely settled when the palace shifted into a frenzy of preparations. The Hunt Festival was coming, 3 days of feasting, contests, and the ceremonial hunt that marked the turning of the season. For the servants, it meant endless work. Banners to hang, silver to polish, floors to scrub until they gleamed. Evelyn threw herself into the tasks, hoping exhaustion would quiet the wild thrum of her heart. But no amount of work could keep her from thinking of him. King Alden. The way his eyes lingered when they crossed paths in the corridor. The way he had said her name as though it was something precious. She should have been afraid. And she was. But part of her wanted to be seen again. On the morning of the festival, the courtyard was alive with music and laughter. Nobles in their finest clothes gathered to watch as the warriors and their wolves displayed their skill. Evelyn was stationed near the edges of the field, carrying drinks for the guests. She kept her head bowed, but her gaze strayed to the center when a ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. The king had shifted. Her breath caught. Where Alden had stood moments ago now prowled a massive black wolf, his fur glinting like obsidian in the sunlight. His sheer size dwarfed every other wolf on the field. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the tray. Something about seeing him like this, raw, powerful, untamed, made her heart stumble. The crowd cheered as Alden's wolf lunged forward, chasing the decoy across the field with terrifying grace. Evelyn couldn't look away. Every muscle, every movement radiated command, and then chaos broke out. A blur of fur and teeth leapt from the tree line, a rogue wolf, gaunt and frothing, eyes wild. Screams erupted. The nobles closest to the field stumbled back in terror. Without thinking, Evelyn dropped her tray and ran. A child had fallen near the edge of the field, too terrified to move. The rogue was charging straight toward him. Evelyn's body moved before her mind could catch up. She flung herself between the child and the attacker, arms thrown wide, bracing for impact. But before the wolf could strike, a black shadow collided with it midair. Alden. He pinned the rogue to the ground with a snarl so deep it vibrated through the earth. Guards swarmed in, dragging the rogue away as the king shifted back into his human form, chest heaving. His golden eyes swept the crowd until they found her, Evelyn clutching the crying child, trembling but unhurt. For a long, charged moment, he just looked at her. No words, no nod. Just that golden gaze, molten and unreadable. That night, Evelyn was cleaning the corridor outside the great hall when one of the guards approached. "The king requests your presence," he said simply. Her breath faltered. My presence?" "In his private chambers," the guard clarified, and Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. She stood outside the double doors for what felt like an eternity, palms sweating, before finally stepping inside. The room was warm, lit by a fire that threw shadows along the walls. Alden stood by the window, his back to her, broad shoulders tense beneath his dark tunic. "Your Majesty," she said softly, bowing her head. "Evelyn," he said, turning to face her. The sound of her name on his tongue nearly undid her. "You acted without thought today," he said at last. "You could have been killed." She swallowed. "I couldn't just stand there." Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not quite admiration, but something in between. "You are braver than most of my nobles," he murmured. Evelyn's breath caught. She didn't know what to do with his praise. It felt too heavy, too dangerous. "I only did what anyone would have done," she whispered. "No," Alden said, stepping closer until the firelight caught the sharp planes of his face. "No, not anyone." The air between them shifted, thickened. Evelyn's pulse pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "You may go," he said finally, though his voice was softer now, as if reluctant. She nodded quickly and fled the room, heart racing, her mind replaying the way he had looked at her, like she was no longer just a maid. That night, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart still beat too fast. Something had changed between them, and no amount of wishing could change it back. The next few days were different. Everywhere Evelyn went, it felt like whispers followed her, invisible threads tugging at her, reminding her of that night in the king's chambers. She told herself not to think about it, not to read meaning into his words or the quiet intensity of his gaze. And yet, every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in front of the fire, golden eyes fixed on her, voice low and soft as he said her name. Her wolf had not been still since. Her duties slowly brought her closer to the king's wing of the palace. She didn't know if the head maid was punishing her or simply trusting her after the festival incident, but she now found herself polishing the floors of his private corridor, replacing the flowers in his study, arranging goblets before the council gathered. Each time she moved as quietly as possible, head bowed, praying she wouldn't run into him. But fate, or perhaps something far more dangerous, seemed determined to cross their paths. One evening, she was called to the council room with a tray of wine. The room was alive with murmurs as warriors and advisors discussed rogue patrols, but Evelyn barely heard a word. Her hands were steady as she placed goblets along the table until she reached the king. He was seated at the head of the table, sharp and commanding in a black tunic. Evelyn kept her head down, focusing on the goblet, but when she moved to set it before him, his fingers brushed hers. Just for a second. But it was enough. A jolt shot through her, sharp and hot, and she almost dropped the tray. She glanced up, startled, and found him watching her with that same unreadable expression. But his hand didn't move right away. Neither of them spoke. Then one of the advisors cleared his throat, and Evelyn quickly stepped back, pulse thundering in her ears. After that moment, nothing felt the same. It was as though some invisible thread had been tied between them, pulling her into his orbit. She began to notice the little things, the way his gaze found her when she entered a room, the way his voice softened when he addressed her, the almost imperceptible pause before he dismissed her from a task. And worse, she began to crave it. Every stolen glance, every accidental brush of hands when she passed him documents or goblets. Her wolf was restless now, pacing beneath her skin as though it knew something she didn't. One afternoon, as she was leaving the king's study after placing fresh flowers, she nearly collided with him in the doorway. "My king," she gasped, stepping back quickly. For the first time, she saw the corner of his mouth curve. Not quite a smile, but something close enough to make her heart skip. "You seem to always be where I am," he said lightly. I'm only doing my work," she whispered, clutching her hands together. "I know," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "But you do it very well." Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe until he had walked past her down the hall, his presence leaving a strange, aching emptiness behind. That night, Evelyn sat on her cot in the servants' quarters, staring at her trembling hands. This could not continue. She could not allow herself to feel this way. She was just a maid. He was the Alpha King. And yet, she pressed her palm to her chest, as if to quiet the wild hammering of her heart, and whispered into the darkness, "Why does it feel like I was always meant to find you?" Evelyn told herself to be careful. After that near smile in the corridor, after the warmth of his words, she had tried to put distance between them, waking earlier, leaving rooms before he arrived, keeping her head down until her neck ached. But fate had other plans. The morning court was unusually crowded when Evelyn entered with a tray of wine. The air felt different, charged with anticipation. At the front of the room, standing near the king's throne, was a woman Evelyn had never seen before. She was breathtaking, tall, poised, her dark hair twisted into a crown of braids that gleamed under the torchlight. The fine silver of her gown shimmered with every movement, marking her as someone of wealth and status. "Lady Selene," one of the guards whispered nearby, his voice full of awe. Evelyn's heart dropped into her stomach. She had heard the other maids gossip about Lady Selene, the daughter of a powerful Alpha house, rumored to be the perfect match for the king. The whispers grew louder as the court began. "She's been invited to stay. They say the council wants her as queen. She and the king are a perfect match." Evelyn tried to ignore it, tried to keep her step steady as she served wine, but her chest ached with every laugh that spilled from Selene's lips. Every time the woman leaned closer to Alden, as if she had a right to be near him. And yet, every time Evelyn dared to glance toward the dais, she found the king's golden gaze not on Lady Selene, but on her. It was maddening. Her pulse quickened under the weight of his stare, but she forced herself to look away. If anyone saw, if Lady Selene saw, It would be her ruin. Later that day, the servants' quarters buzzed with talk. "Did you see how beautiful she is?" one maid gushed. "Of course she'll be queen," another said. Who else could stand beside the king? Evelyn stayed silent, scrubbing at a goblet until her fingers ached. But that night, when the hallways were empty and quiet, she let herself lean against the cool stone wall and whisper the truth her pride wouldn't let her admit aloud. It hurt. More than it should. The next evening, she was called again to serve wine in the great hall. Lady Selene was seated at the king's side now, her hand brushing against his arm as she spoke to him in a low, confident voice. Evelyn kept her gaze fixed on the goblet she carried, but as she passed the dais, she felt it. That familiar, heavy stare. She dared to glance up. Alden's eyes found hers across the hall, unwavering, steady as the moon. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, his gaze pinning her in place, Selene's presence forgotten. Then someone spoke his name, breaking the spell. Evelyn hurried away, heart racing, her hands trembling so badly she nearly spilled the wine. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, torn between two truths. She had no right to feel this way. And yet, the thought of the king with Lady Selene made something inside her twist and snarl. Her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, as if refusing to accept what everyone else believed was inevitable. Alden, too, found no rest that night. He should have been listening to Selene's carefully chosen words, nodding politely at her courtly compliments. But every time he glanced toward the back of the hall, he saw Evelyn's face, and for the first time since taking the throne, the future his council envisioned for him, a queen of noble blood, a safe alliance, felt unbearably suffocating. The gossip didn't die down the next day. If anything, it grew louder. The castle's kitchens buzzed with talk of how beautifully Lady Selene danced at court the previous night. The laundresses giggled over how she and the king had looked almost like a mated pair. Even the guards whispered about her future as though it was already decided. Evelyn told herself she didn't care. She told herself it didn't matter. But as she polished the silver goblets alone that evening, the memory of the king's eyes on her, steady and burning even with Selene beside him, would not leave her. Her chest felt too tight. When her duties were done, she slipped quietly out into the palace gardens, seeking the cool night air to steady her thoughts. The moon was high, silver light spilling over the marble paths and hedges. The flowers were sleeping, their petals closed, but the garden smelled sweet, like jasmine and damp earth. Evelyn sat on the edge of the fountain, hugging her knees to her chest. "Why do I care?" she whispered into the night. She was a maid, a servant. The king's world was not hers. And yet the thought of him smiling at Lady Selene, of him taking another as his queen, made something inside her break. Her throat tightened, and before she could stop herself, tears slipped down her cheeks. A shadow fell across the fountain. Evelyn gasped, quickly swiping at her face, but it was too late. King Alden stood a few paces away, dressed in dark riding leathers, as though he had just returned from the training grounds. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, unreadable. "Why are you out here alone?" His voice was low, quiet enough that it felt like it belonged to this night and no other. Evelyn tried to stand, but her legs trembled. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to stay." The word was soft, but it held command. Evelyn froze as he walked closer, his presence filling the space like heat from a fire. "You were crying," he said simply. Evelyn looked away. It was nothing, just foolishness. He stopped in front of her, so close she could see the faint silver flecks in his irises. Evelyn. Her name on his lips made her heart stutter. "You should never bow your head," Alden said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "Not before anyone. Not even me." The words undid her. Her chest ached as she whispered, "I don't even know where I belong." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of the fountain's trickle. Then Alden moved, slowly, deliberately, He reached out and tilted her chin up with his gloved hand. Moonlight caught her tear-stained face. "Perhaps," he said quietly, his voice almost a growl. "You belong here." Evelyn's breath caught. The world seemed to still. No court, no Celine, no gossip. Just the two of them in the garden, the night holding its breath. His thumb brushed just beneath her jaw. Not enough to be improper, but enough to set her wolf alight. For one dizzying heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted him to. Her lips parted in a shaky breath, and Alden's eyes darkened. But then he stepped back, as though tearing himself away. "This is dangerous," he murmured half to himself. Evelyn's heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Yes," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was agreeing with him, or begging him to come back. He turned away first, running a hand through his hair as though fighting something within himself. "Go back inside," he said finally, his voice rough. "Before someone sees you." And then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the garden paths, leaving Evelyn standing by the fountain with her pulse still racing and her lips tingling with the memory of what almost was. Sleep did not come easily. For Evelyn, every time she closed her eyes, she felt again the warm weight of his hand against her chin, the low rumble of his voice saying she belonged here. For Alden, pacing his private chambers, the memory of her tear-stained face and the wild urge to claim her refused to leave him. The moon outside their windows was the same, high, pale, and silent, bearing witness to the restless hearts of a king and the maid he could not seem to stay away from. The next few days after the moonlit encounter were unbearable. Evelyn tried to lose herself in work, scrubbing, sweeping, polishing, anything to keep her mind off the memory of Alden's hand under her chin. But every time she passed the corridor leading to the gardens, her heart betrayed her, beating faster as if it remembered what happened there. And Alden? He was worse. He caught himself scanning every hall, every courtyard, as though searching for her. His counsel noticed his distraction. His wolf growled under his skin when he didn't catch even a glimpse of her during the day. It all came to a head during the ceremony of the crescent moon, a royal gathering held in the Great Hall. Evelyn had been assigned to serve wine, staying close to the walls and keeping her head bowed. She thought if she kept small and silent, the ache in her chest would stay hidden. But the moment Alden walked in, she felt it. His presence washed over her like a storm. Powerful, commanding, and something inside her wolf stirred violently. She risked one look at him. Their eyes met across the hall. A spark leapt through her, so strong she nearly dropped the tray she was holding. And that's when it happened. A low, deep sound rumbled through the hall, a sound so primal it made everyone freeze. The king's wolf. Alden's golden eyes flashed, glowing fiercely. His wolf had risen, unbidden, answering something in the air, something in her. Gasps rippled through the room as heads turned toward Evelyn, the quiet maid standing frozen with her tray. "No," Evelyn whispered under her breath, dread seizing her spine. But it was too late. The entire court could feel it, the bond, the invisible tether sparking between the king and the nameless servant girl. "She's his mate," someone whispered. The words spread like fire. Celine's face twisted in shock, then rage. The Queen Mother's lips thinned until they were nearly white. The hall descended into a murmur of disbelief. Evelyn's legs moved before she thought. She ran. The tray clattered to the floor behind her as she bolted from the great hall, through the stone corridors, her breath coming fast and sharp. She didn't stop until she burst into the starlit courtyard, chest heaving. She pressed her hands to her face, trembling. This couldn't be happening. She had survived years of being nothing in her old pack, had come here to hide, to be invisible, and now the entire kingdom knew she was the king's fated mate. Footsteps echoed behind her. Evelyn spun just in time to see Alden striding toward her, his cloak flaring behind him. "Evelyn!" Her heart lurched at the sound of her name. She stumbled back a step. "Stay away," she said, though her voice shook. Alden didn't stop until he was standing just a breath away. His golden eyes still glowed faintly, his jaw tight. "You can run from the court," he said, his voice low, rough with something between fury and need. "But not from me." Evelyn's breath caught. "This bond, this thing between us, it won't go away." His voice softened slightly as if he could feel her panic. "I've tried to ignore it. I can't, and neither can you." "I never asked for this," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Neither did I." His hand came up as though to touch her cheek, then stopped, hovering in the air. "But the moon chose, and I will not let them hurt you for it." Her wolf shivered at his words, but her human heart, it was still terrified. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't belong here." Alden's eyes darkened. "You belong with me." It was not a request. It was a vow. And though Evelyn's knees felt weak, though her chest ached with fear and longing all at once, a part of her, the part that had always been searching for a place, a pack, a home, knew he was right. The palace could not stop talking. The maids whispered that the king had chased after her. The guards swore they had heard him growl like a wolf claiming his mate. And in the Queen Mother's chambers, Ilara sat with Lady Selene, plotting. "This cannot stand," Ilara said coldly, her nails digging into the arm of her chair. "If he refuses to reject her," Selene hissed, "then we will make sure she rejects him." Meanwhile, Evelyn lay awake in her small servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with the memory of his voice. "You belong with me." No one had ever said such words to her, and no matter how hard she tried to deny it, the bond between them was growing stronger. The next morning the palace was buzzing. Servants whispered in corners, ministers muttered over scrolls, and gossip spread like wildfire through the corridors. The Alpha King had found his mate, and she was no noble. By mid-morning, Alden was summoned to the council chamber. Queen Mother Ilara was waiting for him, regal and cold in her silver gown, her crown catching the light like a blade. "You've brought shame on this court," she said without preamble. Her voice carried the weight of centuries of tradition. "A king cannot bind himself to a nameless maid. You will reject her, Alden." Alden stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight. "No." The word rang out in the chamber like a war drum. Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Do you understand what you are saying? The council will not accept an Omega of no birthright as queen. The Pax will rebel." Alden's golden gaze darkened, his wolf pressing against the surface. "Let them. I will not reject what the moon has chosen for me." "You are a king," Ilara snapped. "Your choices are not your own." Alden's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Then perhaps it is time they learned that I am not a king to be ruled." The chamber fell into silence. Ilara's face hardened, but she said nothing more. That evening, Evelyn's world tilted again. She had just finished polishing the king's study table when she heard a voice she thought she'd left behind forever. "Well, well," the voice drawled, dripping with mockery. "If it isn't the little shadow." Her blood ran cold. She turned, and there he was. Lysander. Her foster brother leaned against the doorframe, a cruel smile on his face, looking completely at home despite the fact that this was the royal palace. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "I came to see what became of you." He smirked, stepping closer. "And look at you, playing maid for the king. Oh, but that's not all, is it? Word in the servants' hall is that you're the king's chosen mate." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, wouldn't I?" His grin widened. "Imagine what the court will say when they find out you're nothing. No bloodline, no name. Just a stray my parents pitied enough to take in." Evelyn's nails dug into her palms. "Leave," he chuckled, amused by her defiance. "I will, for a price. You don't want me to tell the council about your little past? Pay me. Or better yet, leave the palace before you ruin the king's life." Her breath caught. "I won't run." His eyes narrowed, sensing something had changed in her since she left the pack. "Then you'll regret it, little shadow." And with that, he was gone, leaving Evelyn shaken to her core. Alden found her in the servants' corridor, pale and quiet. "What happened?" he asked softly, stepping close. Evelyn hesitated, then whispered, "Someone from my past is here." The king's expression hardened instantly. "Who?" "My foster brother." Her voice broke. "He wants to ruin me." Alden's hand closed gently but firmly around her wrist. "He won't." "You don't understand," Evelyn said, pulling back, tears threatening. "If they know I have no name, no family." "They will know," Alden cut in, his voice low, fierce. "And they will bow to you anyway." Her breath caught. "You are my mate, Evelyn," he said, his golden eyes burning. "I will not let anyone take you from me. Not the council, not my mother, not some petty wolf from your past." The way he said it, like a vow, like a claim, made her knees weak. For the first time, Evelyn wondered if she had been wrong to fear what was between them. Perhaps she wasn't meant to run anymore. For days after Lysander's arrival, Evelyn felt as though she was walking on a blade's edge. Everywhere she turned, she felt eyes on her. Whispers followed her through the halls. Lady Celine's mocking smiles grew sharper. The Queen Mother's polite but cutting remarks became bolder, now made in front of ministers and nobles. "You should be grateful you are allowed to breathe this air," Ilara said one morning as Evelyn served tea in the council chamber. "If you truly love the king, you would free him from this embarrassment." Evelyn kept her head down, hands trembling around the teapot. She didn't answer, but the words pierced her. By the time she escaped to the servants' quarters, she felt hollow. Celine found her later, cornering her near the laundry hall. "Do you know what you are doing?" the high-born wolf asked, her beautiful face twisted in disdain. "Do you think this is a fairy tale? You're not his equal. You're not anything. When the council forces him to reject you, you'll wish you had left quietly." The words pushed Evelyn closer to a breaking point, and then Lysander appeared again. This time he wasn't smirking. He was grinning like a wolf who had caught the scent of prey. "The council is meeting tomorrow," he told her with false cheer. "I wonder what they'll think when they hear that the king's precious mate used to sleep in the stables because no one wanted her inside the pack house." Evelyn felt something inside her crack. That night she went to the small room where she slept and packed the little she owned. A faded cloak, a comb, the threadbare scarf she'd had since she was a child. Her heart felt heavy, but her decision was clear. She had to leave. Better to break her own heart than let Alden lose his throne because of her. She didn't hear the door open. "Where are you going?" Evelyn froze, clutching her small bundle. She turned slowly to find Alden standing in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, his golden eyes burning. Her throat tightened. "I have to go." "No." The single word was a command. Evelyn shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't understand. They will never accept me. Your mother, Celine, the council, they're right. I'm no one. If I stay, they'll tear you apart for choosing me." Alden stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. The small room felt even smaller with him in it. "Let them try." His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I am king. They will not decide my life for me." "It's not just your life." Evelyn's voice broke as tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's your kingdom, your throne. I can't let you lose everything because of me." In 2 strides, Alden closed the distance between them. "You think leaving will save me?" he said, his voice low but fierce. "Evelyn, you are not my weakness. You are my strength. Every day since I met you, I have fought harder, thought clearer, led better. You make me more than a king. You make me whole." Her breath caught. Alden reached out, cupping her face in his hands. "Look at me," he said softly. She did. "Do you trust me?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Then stay." Something inside her broke loose. Fear, longing, love, all spilling out at once. "Alden." Her voice was barely a breath, but it was all he needed. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, claiming, a storm breaking after weeks of holding back. Evelyn's hands clutched his tunic as if anchoring herself. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him, and for the first time since she came to the palace, she felt safe. Truly safe. As though nothing outside that room could touch her. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "You are mine," Alden said, his forehead resting against hers. "And I will fight the whole kingdom if I have to." Evelyn's tears had turned into something softer now. Relief, hope. "I'll stay," she whispered. The smallest smile tugged at his lips. "Good." He kissed her again, slower this time, and when he finally left her room, Evelyn felt as though the air itself had changed. She was no longer just the maid who had come to hide. She was the king's mate, and no one, not the council, not the queen mother, not even Lysander, was going to take that away from her. The taste of Alden's kiss still lingered on Evelyn's lips long after he left her chamber that night. Her fingers brushed over them, as if to remind herself it had really happened. That the king had kissed her, claimed her, chosen her despite everything. But dawn came too soon, and with it, the weight of reality. The council had summoned a meeting. The news of Alden's open defiance of his mother had spread beyond the palace walls, stirring a storm among the noble houses. Evelyn stood in the back of the great hall, heart pounding as the council gathered in their scarlet robes, voices low but sharp like drawn daggers. She wished she could disappear into the marble columns, but it was too late to hide. This was her trial as much as Alden's. Alden entered, tall, dark, unshaken. His black cloak swirled around him as he took his seat on the throne, his golden eyes flashing like embers. Every noble rose to bow, but the air was tense, heavy with something close to rebellion. Lord Harland, the head of the council, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the council calls for a vote. An Omega cannot sit on the throne of our kingdom. The moon's choice may be honored in private, but the crown must stay pure." Evelyn's chest tightened. Pure. That word stung like a whip. Alden's jaw ticked, but he said nothing at first. His silence was louder than thunder. Celine, in her flowing silver gown, seized the moment. "This is not about love, Your Majesty. It is about duty. You owe the kingdom a queen worthy of its lineage, not—" Her eyes darted to Evelyn like knives. "A maid who wormed her way into your bed." The hall erupted in murmurs. Evelyn felt heat crawl up her neck, shame and fury battling inside her. Alden rose slowly, his presence filling the hall like fire. His voice cut through the noise, low and commanding. "Enough." The hall fell silent. Alden's gaze swept over the room, landing finally on Celine. "You dare accuse the moon's chosen in my court?" His voice was steel. "Evelyn is not here because of schemes or seduction. She is here because fate itself brought her to me." Celine's face paled. The council shifted uneasily. Alden took a step forward, his voice rising, rich and dangerous. "Hear me well. Evelyn is my mate, chosen by the moon, blessed by the bond that runs deeper than your politics, deeper than your petty ambition. You may vote, you may whisper, but I will not reject her." The words struck like lightning. The nobles gasped. Some looked outraged, others awed. Evelyn's breath caught. No one had ever defended her like that. Not when the pack mocked her, not when she was cast out. For the first time she felt seen, chosen, loved. But the council was not done. Lord Harland's voice was cold as winter. "If you will not bend, Your Majesty, then you leave us no choice. A blood challenge may be called, to test if your claim is worthy." The room went deathly quiet. Blood challenge, the ancient right, fire and claws until death or submission. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Alden's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "Then let them come." His wolf glimmered behind his eyes, wild and unyielding. "I will fight anyone who dares to question the bond between me and my mate." The declaration sent a shiver through the hall. Some nobles looked away, unable to meet the king's blazing gaze. Celine's face twisted with rage, her plan unraveling before her eyes. As the council adjourned, Alden descended the steps of the throne and strode straight to Evelyn. The hall had emptied, but the echo of his words still hung between them. "You shouldn't have stood there," he murmured, reaching to brush her cheek. "You looked ready to break." "I almost did," she admitted, voice trembling. "But then you spoke. You said I was your mate." "You are," he said simply, fiercely. His hand cupped the back of her neck. "And I will burn this kingdom to the ground before I let them take you from me." Evelyn's breath hitched. "Alden." But whatever she meant to say was lost, as his lips crashed against hers. This kiss was not tender like the last one. It was fire, wild and claiming, the kiss of a man who had just declared war on the world for her. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, both of them breathing hard. "From this moment," he whispered, "you are no longer just a maid. You are mine." And though fear still twisted inside her, Evelyn felt something stronger rise to meet it. The first spark of a queen's courage. The king's words from the council chamber still rang in Evelyn's mind long after everyone had left. "You are mine." But the palace was far from quiet. By nightfall, whispers spread like wildfire through the halls, some voices speaking of destiny and fate, others hissing of scandal and disgrace. Evelyn could feel the weight of their stares wherever she walked. Celine's stares were the sharpest of all. That evening, Evelyn was summoned to the Queen Mother's wing to deliver tea, her hands steady despite the dread curling in her stomach. She bowed, placed the tray carefully on the gilded table, and excused herself quickly. She had barely taken 3 steps when a piercing cry echoed behind her. "Poison!" The shout ripped through the air. Evelyn spun, horrified, as Queen Mother Alara clutched her throat and gasped. Servants rushed to her side, shouting for the guards. Before Evelyn could speak, Celine's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "It was her!" Celine's finger was leveled at Evelyn, eyes gleaming with cruel triumph. "She brought the tea. She must have done it." The guards grabbed Evelyn before she could react. "I didn't—" Her protest was lost in the clamor. "Please, I didn't do anything." Her heart pounded in her chest as she was dragged through the palace corridors. Faces appeared in doorways, whispers following her like shadows. By the time they threw her into the dungeons, the shame was almost unbearable. Cold stone bit into her knees as she collapsed on the floor, tears streaming silently down her face. Not again. The memories of her pack came rushing back. The mockery, the accusations, the way no one had believed her before. She had worked so hard to escape that life, and now she was back where she started. Caged. Alone. But she wasn't entirely alone. Alden stormed into the dungeon an hour later, his cloak swirling like smoke, fury radiating from him like heat. The guards fell back at his approach. "Who dares accuse my mate?" His voice shook the walls. Evelyn's breath caught. He still called her that, even now. She scrambled to her feet. "Alden, I swear I didn't—" "I know." His words were a growl, but his eyes softened when they found hers. "I know, Evelyn, and I will prove it." What followed was a night the palace would never forget. Alden interrogated every servant, every guard, every council member who had been near the Queen Mother's wing. His wolf's dominance left no room for lies. By dawn, the truth emerged. A servant had been bribed by Celine herself to slip a rare herb into the tea, one that would cause no lasting harm but mimic poison. The king's wrath was swift. Celine was dragged into the throne room, her gown torn, her hair disheveled but her chin still high. "You tried to frame my mate," Alden said, his voice cold as steel. "You endangered the Queen Mother. For that, you are banished from this palace, from this kingdom." "No," Celine's scream echoed, full of rage and desperation. "You will regret this, Alden. You will regret choosing her over me." But Alden didn't flinch. He turned his back on her, the ultimate dismissal. When she was gone, Evelyn stood frozen at the edge of the hall, still shaken. "You defended me," she whispered when they were finally alone. "You believed me when no one else did." Alden stepped closer, his golden eyes fierce. Because I know you, Evelyn. I know your heart. And I will never let anyone break it again. She looked up at him, tears stinging her eyes. You almost sound like you love you. His voice was softer now, his thumb brushing her cheek. I think I do. Or maybe I always have. Her breath caught as his forehead pressed against hers. The bond between them pulsed, alive and undeniable. And for the first time, Evelyn let herself believe it. That maybe she could survive this world of thrones and wolves not just as a maid, not just as his mate, but as something more. The palace had not been this tense in years. Celine's banishment sent shockwaves through the entire kingdom. Nobles whispered in corridors, servants kept their heads down, and the council chamber buzzed with quiet outrage. But Alden didn't care. He had made his choice. And Evelyn could feel it. In the way the king no longer looked at her like a passing shadow, but like the very moonlight that guided him. He walked with her through the halls now, openly, daring anyone to speak. The whispers grew louder, but so did the bond between them. It was on the third night after Celine's exile that trouble struck. The warning howl tore through the palace like a blade, waking Evelyn from restless sleep. She scrambled to her feet just as the alarm bells began to toll. Rogues. Her heart pounded as she rushed into the corridor, servants running past her in a panic. The scent of blood and smoke filled the air, and somewhere in the distance the clash of claws and steel rang out. Evelyn, a guard shouted, spotting her. You must get to the safe room. No, she said, surprising even herself with the steel in her voice. Take me to the king. The guard hesitated, but something in her expression must have convinced him. He led her through the palace corridors, ducking past shattered windows and overturned torches, until they reached the throne room. Alden was there, his massive black wolf standing between a group of council members and 3 rogues that had broken through the gates. His fur was streaked with blood, not his own, and his golden eyes blazed with fury. Then one of the rogues broke away from the fight, leaping straight for Alden's unguarded back. Evelyn didn't think. She grabbed the nearest fallen spear and hurled it with all her strength. The weapon struck the rogue mid-air, sending it crashing to the ground. The room fell silent. Alden turned, shifting back into his human form in one fluid motion, his chest heaving. His eyes found hers across the chaos, and for a long, charged moment, no one dared breathe. He crossed the room to her in 3 strides. You could have been killed, he growled, grabbing her shoulders. You could have been killed, she shot back, her voice shaking. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Something flickered in his eyes then. Pride, admiration, something deeper. His wolf pushed at the surface and the truth hit him like a blow. She wasn't just his mate. She was his Luna. He pulled her close, his voice a low, reverent whisper. The moon was right about you. You are my equal. Before Evelyn could respond, more howls echoed outside. Reinforcements arriving. Alden straightened, his grip still firm on her hand. Stay with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And she did. She followed him into the courtyard where the final battle raged, where fire lit the night sky and blood darkened the stones. Together, they fought, Alden's claws and teeth flashing, Evelyn driving back attackers with nothing but instinct and courage. When the last rogue fell, the courtyard was silent but for the sound of heavy breathing. The survivors stared at the king and the girl beside him, no longer a timid maid, but something far more powerful. Alden turned to his council, his chest still heaving. You all saw her tonight. You saw her courage, her strength. The moon chose her, and I do not reject what the moon has given me. The council bowed, some reluctantly, others with newfound respect. Later, as dawn broke over the palace, Alden and Evelyn stood on the balcony overlooking the wreckage. His arm was around her shoulders, his touch protective but proud. You are not just a servant, he murmured. You are not just my mate. Tonight, Evelyn, you became my Luna. Her breath caught, tears pricking her eyes. And what if I'm not ready to be Luna? He smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. Then I will wait until you are. But tonight, my heart already bows to you. And as the sun rose over the palace, painting the sky gold, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she didn't just belong here, she was meant to rule here. The sun had barely climbed over the palace walls when the council summoned Alden to the great hall. Evelyn stood beside him, her palms clammy, her heart still echoing with the events of the night before, the battle, the blood, Alden's fierce declaration that she was his Luna. She had felt unstoppable then, like the moon herself had blessed her. But now, standing before the full council, she felt small again. Chancellor Mael, the eldest council member, struck the marble floor with his staff. By tradition, no wolf may sit as Luna without first passing the trial. Whispers rippled through the chamber. She will fail, someone murmured. She is just a maid, another hissed. Alden's jaw tightened. The council knows what happened last night. She fought beside me. The moon has chosen her. What more proof do you need? Mael's sharp gaze slid to Evelyn. The proof of the trial, Your Majesty. If she passes, she will silence every doubt. If she fails... He let the implication hang like a blade. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She glanced at Alden, who looked as if he wanted to tear the council apart piece by piece. But before he could speak, she stepped forward. I'll do it, she said, her voice quiet but steady. The hall went still. Alden turned to her, his golden eyes searching her face. Evelyn, I have run all my life, she said softly. From my pack, from my pain, from who I am. If I am to stay here, if I am to be your Luna, I cannot run anymore. Something in his expression softened then, pride replacing his worry. He nodded once, though his hand brushed hers, a silent promise that he would be near. The next day, the trial began. The first challenge was of courage. Evelyn was led into the Moon Hall, a vast, candle-lit chamber where the spirits of the ancestors were said to linger. She had to walk barefoot across a narrow stone bridge suspended over a deep pool of moonlit water. Every step tested her balance. Every flicker of shadow seemed to whisper her failures. Halfway across, she froze. Her mind conjured the voices of her pack. Lysander calling her Shadow, her foster mother reminding her she had no name, no bloodline. Then she heard Alden's voice, faint but steady from the edge of the bridge. Evelyn, look at me. She lifted her eyes. His gaze held hers, strong and unwavering, and suddenly the voices in her head quieted. She stepped forward. One step, then another, until she reached the other side. The council nodded in approval. The second challenge was of wisdom. Evelyn was placed in a stone courtyard with 3 snarling wolves circling her, illusions conjured by the court seer. Each wolf represented a choice: fight, flee, or submit. Her pulse raced, but instead of running, she crouched low and let her wolf surface, her aura radiating calm submission. The wolves sniffed her, then bowed their heads before vanishing into mist. She knows when to fight and when to yield, the seer announced. The final challenge was of loyalty. She was brought before a fire pit and handed a dagger. Swear your loyalty to the king and to the pack, Chancellor Mael intoned, or walk away now and leave this palace forever. The dagger was cold in her hand. This was no illusion. This was the moment that would bind her fate. She looked at Alden. He stood on the other side of the fire, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning. Slowly, Evelyn knelt, pressed the dagger to her palm, and drew a line of blood. The fire blazed high, as though the moon itself approved. I swear, she said, her voice ringing clear, I will stand by the Alpha King. In peace, in war, in moonlight, and in shadow. I will not run. The council rose as one, bowing their heads. It is done, Mael said solemnly. The trials are past. She is Luna. Later, when the hall had emptied and the palace had quieted, Alden pulled her into the shadows of the corridor and kissed her, fierce, desperate, full of pride. You silenced them all, he murmured against her lips. Her breath caught. Did I silence you too? He smiled, brushing his thumb over the cut on her palm. No, you made me louder. And under the moonlight streaming through the palace windows, Evelyn felt it. Not just the weight of the title, but the strength to bear it. She was no longer the shadow. She was the Luna. The night air was cool, silvered by the light of the full moon. Evelyn stood at the edge of the sacred clearing, her ceremonial white dress fluttering softly in the breeze. Every step she had taken, from the pack that hated her to the palace that doubted her, had led her here. Tonight, there would be no more running. Behind her, the palace stood quiet but watchful. Council and servants gathered at a respectful distance. This was no longer just a king's duty. This was destiny unfolding. Alden stepped forward, his presence commanding and yet impossibly gentle as his golden eyes found hers. For a moment, the world went silent. There were no whispers, no doubts, just the two of them and the moon overhead. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and reverent. "Are you ready?" She swallowed, her throat tight, but nodded. Yes. They walked together into the center of the clearing, where the moonlight shone brightest. The air thrummed with power, ancient and electric. Evelyn could feel her wolf pacing inside her, restless, eager, as if the moon itself was calling her forward. Alden reached for her hand. The simple touch sent shivers through her, not the nervous kind, but the kind that made her heart pound with something dangerously close to joy. When he spoke again, his voice carried through the clearing. "Before the moon and before our ancestors, I claim Evelyn as my mate, my equal, my Luna." The words echoed like thunder, and then he tilted his head back and howled, a sound so deep and resonant, it made every wolf in the clearing bow low. Evelyn's breath caught, her wolf rising to answer him. Her own howl tore from her throat, softer but strong, and the sound made Alden's eyes darken with something primal, something fierce. In the next moment his form shifted, fur rippling, bones reshaping, until his massive black wolf stood before her, magnificent and terrible under the moonlight. Her own wolf burst free, and suddenly she was running, paws pounding the earth, wind rushing through her fur. Alden's wolf chased her, always just a step behind, until he caught up and ran beside her, their bodies brushing as they circled the clearing in a wild, dizzying dance. The bond clicked into place like a lock finding its key. She felt him, truly felt him. In her mind, in her heart, in every part of her soul. "You are mine," his wolf voice rumbled through her. "And you are mine," she answered, no longer afraid. When they shifted back, they stood facing each other, chests heaving, hair damp with sweat and moonlight. Alden closed the distance between them in 2 strides and cupped her face with both hands. "Evelyn," he breathed, almost in awe. Then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was fire and storm, and every suppressed longing between them finally unleashed. Her hands gripped his tunic, pulling him closer, and his arms circled her waist, lifting her off the ground as if he could never let her go. The clearing erupted in approving howls, but Evelyn barely heard them. All she knew was him. His warmth, his strength, the taste of him, the way he kissed her like she was both his salvation and his undoing. When they finally broke apart, Alden pressed his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. "It's done," he whispered. "You are my Luna, my queen, and nothing will take you from me." Evelyn's heart swelled, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time she believed him. The moon above them burned bright, as if blessing the vow. After the ceremony had ended and the witnesses had left, Alden led her back to his private chambers. The palace was quiet, save for the distant sound of wolves celebrating. In the soft glow of the room's firelight, he kissed her again, slower this time, reverent, like worship. The heat between them flared once more, but now there was no fear, no hesitation, just the two of them claiming each other completely. By the time dawn broke, Evelyn was no longer the nameless shadow who had once scrubbed palace floors. She was queen, she was his, and the entire kingdom would soon know it. The air still smelled of moonlight and pine when Evelyn awoke the next morning, the memory of Alden's lips still burning on hers. She could feel their bond thrumming through her chest, a tether she hadn't asked for but now couldn't imagine living without. The entire palace seemed to hum with the news. Whispers carried down the hallways, servants giggling behind their hands. She was no longer invisible. She was the king's mate. But with recognition came sharper stares. The court nobles who had once dismissed her now watched her every step, weighing her like a hawk sizing up prey. She kept her chin lifted, even when her heart threatened to shrink back into the girl she had once been, the mocked Omega who scrubbed floors to hide from her pack's cruelty. That night, the palace held a feast to honor the completed bond. Evelyn sat beside Alden at the head table, still feeling like an imposter wearing borrowed confidence. Queen Mother Alara's gaze never left her. It was sharp, cold, as though she were waiting for Evelyn to slip, to prove she didn't belong. When the feast ended, Evelyn excused herself for some air. The moon was bright, silvering the palace gardens. She was halfway down the stone path when she heard the scream. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She sprinted toward the sound, skirts tangling at her legs, heart hammering. She found Queen Mother Alara struggling against two cloaked rogues, their teeth bared, their claws glinting in the moonlight. Fear struck Evelyn like a blow, but her wolf surged inside her, demanding action. With a wild cry, she grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it with all her strength. One rogue staggered back, giving Alara a chance to scramble away. The second lunged, but Evelyn planted herself between them and the Queen Mother. She didn't think, didn't flinch. She slashed across its face with the branch and screamed for help. By the time Alden and his guards arrived, Evelyn's gown was ripped, her hands bloodied, but the rogues were down. Alden rushed to her first, gripping her shoulders, his voice thick with fear. "Evelyn, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she panted, pointing toward the Queen Mother. "See to her." Alara, pale and shaken, looked between them. For the first time, her expression held something other than disdain. "You saved my life," she said softly, almost to herself. Evelyn swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she looked, hair loose, face streaked with dirt. But she didn't look away. "I didn't do it for your approval," she said quietly. "I did it because no one deserves to die in the dark." Something shifted in Alara's gaze. The sharp edge dulled. She stepped closer, and for the first time, she didn't look at Evelyn like an intruder. "Perhaps," she murmured, "perhaps the moon knew what it was doing when it chose you." Alden's chest swelled with pride. He pulled Evelyn against him, his wolf rumbling with approval. For the first time since she had arrived at the palace, Evelyn felt something solid beneath her feet, not just belonging, but acceptance beginning to bloom. But deep in the shadows of the palace walls, Lysander watched with cold eyes, his fists clenched. He had lost control of Evelyn once. He wouldn't lose her to the king without a fight. The palace had not known sleep since the night of the attack. The rogues' bodies were burned, the gates reinforced, the court summoned at dawn. The kingdom demanded answers, and Alden gave them. He stood before the council, his voice like thunder, declaring Evelyn not just his mate, but the future Luna Queen. Evelyn stood behind him, still nursing scratches on her arms, still feeling the phantom weight of Alara's gaze from the night before. The Queen Mother had said little since the attack, but her silence now seemed less hostile, more watchful, as though she, too, was waiting to see what Evelyn would do. Preparations for the coronation began immediately. Seamstresses flooded the royal wing with silks and lace, jewelers arriving with tiaras that sparkled like captured stars. Evelyn had never worn anything finer than a simple servant's dress, but when the coronation gown was draped over her shoulders, moon-white, embroidered with silver threads that shimmered as she moved, she felt like she was stepping into the skin of the wolf she was always meant to be. The day of the coronation dawned clear and gold. The throne hall was packed with wolves from every corner of the kingdom, alphas, betas, omegas, and Evelyn could feel their stares burning into her back as she walked the long aisle toward the dais. Every step felt heavy, but Alden's presence beside her was steadying, grounding. At the base of the dais, Queen Mother Alara herself stepped forward, holding the silver coronet. Her expression was unreadable. For one terrible heartbeat, Evelyn thought she might refuse, that she might turn her back on the entire ceremony and doom Evelyn to more whispers and humiliation. But Alara only said in a voice that rang through the hall, "The moon tests us in ways we do not always understand. Tonight, we honor its choice." The coronet settled on Evelyn's head, light as a blessing and heavy as destiny. The hall erupted, wolves bowing, some reluctantly, others with genuine awe. The very same nobles who had sneered now lowered their heads. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had spent her entire life being told she was less than nothing, and now the kingdom bowed to her. Lysander was dragged into the hall in chains just as the ceremony reached its peak. His face was pale, his lips curled in fury. "You think a crown will change who you are?" he spat. "You're still the abandoned pup no one wanted." Alden's growl shook the hall. Enough. But it was Evelyn who stepped forward, her voice calm, almost pitying. "You're wrong, Lysander. I was never unwanted. I was waiting for this moment, waiting to become who I was meant to be." Her words rang like steel. Alden's guards led Lysander away, his threats echoing uselessly down the corridor. He was banished by royal decree, stripped of pack rights and titles, sent into exile. When Evelyn turned back to face the court, she no longer felt the sting of their stares. She stood taller, her wolf thrumming with pride. Alden reached for her hand and raised it high. "Behold your Luna Queen," he declared. The hall roared its approval. And there, beneath the banners of the moon and crown, Evelyn finally smiled. Not the shy, hesitant smile of a girl still unsure of her place, but the fierce, radiant smile of a queen who had claimed it. The palace courtyard glowed with hundreds of lanterns, each one flickering like a star fallen to earth. The coronation feast had ended, but the night was just beginning. The air was soft and sweet, heavy with the scent of moon lilies. Evelyn stood at the edge of the balcony, her gown trailing like moonlight behind her, gazing out over the kingdom she once thought would never accept her. Her fingers curled around the cold marble railing until a warm, calloused hand slid over hers. "Alden, you should be inside celebrating," he murmured, his deep voice brushing against her skin like velvet. "I needed a moment," she whispered back, her heart swelling. "All my life I dreamed of being free of the shame, the whispers, the pity. Now—" She turned toward him, her eyes luminous under the silver moon. "Now, they bow to me. It feels unreal." Alden stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. His other hand came up to tilt her chin, forcing her to look into his golden eyes. "It is real, and no one will ever call you nameless again." His thumb brushed her jaw gently. "You are Evelyn, my queen, my everything." Her throat tightened. "And you are my alpha, my choice. Even if the moon hadn't chosen you, I would have." He smiled, that rare, unguarded smile that made him look more man than king. "Then dance with me, Luna mine." The music from the courtyard drifted up to them, soft, slow, a song of wolves and moonlight. Alden led her down the grand steps, the nobles parting for them, heads bowed in reverence. The court held its breath as the king and his newly crowned queen stepped into the center of the courtyard. Evelyn's hand trembled in his as they began to dance, but Alden's grip was steady, his movements graceful and sure. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. The moon shone directly above them, silvering their hair, their faces, their joined hands. Around them, wolves began to howl, one by one, a chorus of loyalty and joy. Evelyn felt her wolf stir within her, howling back, her bond with Alden glowing like fire through her veins. When the dance ended, Alden didn't let go. He pulled her close until there was no space left between them, until she could feel his heartbeat against her own. Then, before the entire court, he kissed her, not as a king claiming his queen, but as a man in love with the girl who had stolen his soul. The courtyard erupted in cheers. Even Queen Mother Alara smiled, pride softening her once icy gaze. Later that night, after the last toast was made and the last lantern dimmed, Evelyn and Alden stood together on the balcony again, overlooking the kingdom. His arm circled her waist. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. "For what?" "For everything," he said, and his voice held a promise. "For ruling, for fighting, for loving me until our last breath." Evelyn leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. "I was born ready. I just didn't know it." Somewhere in the courtyard below, a lone wolf howled at the moon and others joined until the whole kingdom seemed to sing. Evelyn smiled through tears, feeling at last that she belonged, not just to Alden, not just to the palace, but to the entire kingdom. And under the silver glow of the moon, with Alden's lips brushing her hair, Evelyn knew this was not just the end of her story. It was the beginning of a reign that would be written in the stars. Thank you, Moonshakes, for running with me through every moonlit night, every stolen glance, every heart-stopping twist of Evelyn and Alden's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment below. Tell me your favorite scene, your favorite character, and what moment made your heart race the most. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next love story we create together under the moonlight. You are the reason these stories live, breathe, and shine. Until the next one, stay wild, stay brave, and keep howling at the moon.